Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Asia Society Hong Kong Center. I'm Holly Smith. I coordinate the business and policy programs here, and we are thrilled to have with us tonight the Asian Cultural Council of Hong Kong, our co-presenters of this program. And we're delighted to have Professor Rujing Stacy Huang, Assistant Professor of Music at the University of Hong Kong, to speak about this fascinating topic, when AI creates ethics and economics. We're also delighted to have Alan Lau of M+ with us too. And I'll turn it over to Alexandra Seno, Director of the ACC Hong Kong, to introduce the program. Thanks.
Good evening. I'm Alex Seno, and I am Hong Kong Director of the Asian Cultural Council, an arts grant-making organization advocating for cultural exchange. We were founded in New York in 1961 by John D. Rockefeller III, the same individual who started the Asia Society. So as sister organizations, we share a belief in meaningful conversation and better understanding of the pressing issues of our times. Tonight, we will hear from Professor Rujing Stacy Huang and Mr. Alan Lau on a topic that we in culture currently struggle with: how technology may or may not redefine what we consider to be art. They will focus on music, something that surrounds us every day, from Taylor Swift to your phone ringtone to Mozart. It is the soundtrack of our lives. We are so lucky to have with us Stacy and Alan. Stacy is a 2015 ACC grantee as a traditional music performer, though in the last few years, as a scholar, she has become one of the foremost thinkers on AI and music. A PhD in musicology from Harvard University, she is now an assistant professor of music at the University of Hong Kong. Alan, before anything else, is someone who champions and believes in culture. He gives his time and energy as vice chair of the M+ Museum Board and is chairman of the Hong Kong nonprofit space Parasite. And when he's not doing that, he has been in leadership positions at McKinsey, Tencent, and now Animoca, where he manages a portfolio of 500 technology companies, some of which are in AI. So without further ado, I give you Stacy and Alan.
Thank you to Alex for the introduction. Firstly, it's just it means so much for me to be back with ACC after 2015, which feels like a long time ago, especially because the project I was doing at the time is very different from what I'm speaking about today. And I'll actually get to that a little bit. But also, thank you to Asia Society for co-hosting this event. Yeah, it's just really nice to be out of university and talking to more people beyond the academic circle, which I think has been the main audience I've been speaking to when it comes to this topic. I've been given talks around this topic for quite a number of times, but I think mostly either speaking to the musicological community or the more music, AI, machine learning, tech folks. So I think this is a really special group and different kinds of stakeholders to be talking to about this and thinking together about all these questions that we all have. And I don't think I have any answers to the question you may want to ask me today, but I think that's the fun part, right, with a lot of these debates that we're currently holding in society. So let me get to my slides and we'll start there. So, second. Okay, so hope the sounds will work. But yes, the title today, When AI Creates Ethics and Economics, Music and Artificial Intelligence. So a little bit on self-positioning, I guess. So I think what sets me apart a little bit from maybe a lot of the speakers you will be hearing about on the topic in online or in real life, there are so many talks around AI, creative AI. every day. There's some kind of talk about AI somewhere in this world. But I think maybe what sets me apart slightly is I would just open with a confession that personally I'm quite indifferent about the technology itself. I don't know how many wow moments you've been having since the ChatGPT boom, but I think to me, I haven't really been having, my own. I mean, so the technology itself is actually not what brought me to this field, and what keeps me in this field is actually all the questions that radiate from these technologies, and mostly humanistic questions. And so, well, I guess it's an open declaration that I'm not a technologist, and I don't have a PhD in computer science. I don't know machine learning. The last math course I took was many, many years ago. So, so this is kind of where I come from. And so, yes, it's quite a leap for me to get to music AI, because right before this, on the left, you see this is the kind of music tradition I was working with, and it's the project I was that ACC funded me for in 2015, which is looking at a very, very early court music tradition we're talking Western Zhou dynasty. And so how did I get here? It was via this 5-year EU, so it was a European Research Council 5-year project starting in 2020, and this grant project was approved in 2019. So this is quite some years before this AI boom that we're now living through. So at the time, this project was led by a computer scientist, and he was essentially looking for a non-scientist to join the project. So I was the first one to actually join this project after, besides the PI himself. So this was my first postdoctoral fellowship in Sweden. And so, yeah, essentially the task for me was, as a musicologist, to join the project and think about questions around ethics and culture at the intersections of music and artificial intelligence. So some of the earlier, I guess, small papers and essays I was writing about in this field was more sort of cultural, technological ethics and cross-cultural ethics when it comes to music AI. And again, we're talking 2019-20, and we had no idea this was going to become, I guess, as buzzy as it is today, the topic. Had I known, I think I probably would have stayed away, because I usually prefer like less popular topics and less crowded spaces. So yeah, this is how I got in. And so essentially, for the past few years, I've become, if not the first one, but one of the very first humanist scholars, musicologists to be working directly with computer scientists, from industry and from academia, and to sort of perform humanistic critique on and the pros and the cons, right, about music AI and creative AI in general. So I think a lot of the examples are going to be about music, but it really translates across creative fields. So in the same way I was pulled into this project, the AI Song Contest is, I think, the first competition of this kind. So essentially an annual international competition exploring human AI partnership in the process in songwriting. So this also started the same year with that EU project in 2020. So again, the organizing team was looking for a non-scientist, preferably a musicologist, to join the organizing team and been doing this. So this is how I got in. And right now, I think we're in its 5th year. So the voting is actually going on this year, so this month. And so on the left, you can see the beginning of this competition was done via partnership with Eurovision, in fact. So it was known, I think, to many as the Eurovision AI Song Contest. And I joined the 2nd year when the competition went global, and we kind of departed from the Eurovision model. So I guess in the little time I have, so I think my goal, because I guess I could talk about this for 2 hours, but what I'm going to try to do is just to give a lot of information materials that I think could be good food for thought, and I think really looking forward to the conversation we have. So posing lots, I guess, questions, and some of them may be quite provocative, and I guess the main difference between a scientist and humanist scholar is, as a humanist in humanities, we usually don't have answers to questions, just keep posing new questions. And we don't try to simplify an issue, we try to complicate a lot of seemingly simple questions that we may be thinking about, right? What is art? So, so here you can see, this is from 2023. And so yeah, I guess a quick business landscape in this scene. I'm sure by now you have a lot more startups, and I think every day somewhere in the world someone's starting a new music AI startup and really goes into very different parts of the value chain when it comes to music production. You can now have AI tools for mastering your audio, your song. You don't need a human master engineer anymore, of course, in the mixing side. So, and I think recently the most, I guess, buzzy topic is in generative AI, right? So when AI actually generates music and soundtracks. So here, just very quickly. So you can see when it comes to genre and music space and different, I guess, musical landscape, AI has reached almost, I think, not every, but most corners that we can imagine. I mean, I've been to conferences where people talk about applying AI in classical, Hindustani classical music, Carnatic music, and Peking opera. I mean, it's really a lot of those research has not been made publicly available in the commercially, but it's there. So there's a lot of work being done to all sorts of music practices and traditions, and you have the continuation of Beethoven's Unfinished Symphony here. Let's see. So you have AI making free jazz. You have traditional Irish musicians performing AI-generated traditional Irish traditional tunes. So this is actually from another competition that I was involved with. It was more academic competition, unlike the AI Song Contest, which is very public-facing. So this one, every year comes with a theme. So this year, the theme was to generate, I think, so double jigs, so very specific, genre-specific. And this was the winning team. So in the in the more pop space, this is actually one of the. I think, yeah. So this is actually one of the pieces that I think I rated higher. So I've been participating in these contests as a jury member. It's almost becoming my side gig nowadays, which is to judge various kinds of AI music competitions, which is another fun topic we can talk about when it comes to deciding what is better song, right? Like the question about value, which we'll get to very quickly. But this is from I think 2021, a team from South Korea. Some issue with the audio, but you get the idea. Yeah. So, and this is in the space of death metal. It's another competition. So, of course, machine composed music is not new, right? We have a long history of computer composed music. I mean, this is just one of the early examples from UIUC, one of the, I think, first computer composed piece of music. So I think a lot of the questions and a lot of reasons that's, I guess, freaking the public out or, making people very excited on the other end is actually not new. So dealing with a lot of the similar issues and crisis in copyright. But with AI, I think the major difference is in terms of scale, right? A lot of people is comparing AI's posing challenges to the copyright side of story, compared to sampling. But again, we're talking about similar issues, but at a whole different scale and size. So speaking of scale, this is a recent copyright, this is not a copyright also, but this is a recent court case that just opened, I think, 2 weeks ago. We're talking about $10 million streaming fraud with AI-generated songs, and also I think it was streamed with AI bots. So just one of the many cases going on now. And of course, the industry is busy responding to all these changes. Grammy Recording Academy last year came up with their AI policy, which is essentially, it's okay to have AI in the songs, but AI cannot be nominated as a winner as an artist. So it's very much a tool. I mean, which is, it's a debating point. I don't know where things are going to stand in years to come, but the interesting phrasing here is you need to have meaningful human work of authorship, right? And a lot is changing in the streaming payout model. And so this was Universal and Deezer in 2000, I think this was also 2023, in which essentially decided that we're going to make a differentiation within how these streaming platforms pay out to the tracks. So big artists, big name artists going to get paid more. Amateur musicians, non-artist noise audio, AI artists, white noise soundtracks, all of the functional music, right? Not a lot of us talking about the category of functional music, sleep music, your study music, your ambient music, all of those are going to get much lower royalty rates. So, and I think Spotify recently just also made a very similar change to the policy. And here, right, so we have a very divided public on this issue, right? So on the left, we have, of course, AI enhancing human creativity. I think this is the one line I'm hearing the most. Like every day I'm hearing it a few times, that AI is extending human creativity. It's becoming so much of a cliche to me. And of course, more of the people making this narrative come from the tech side, right? There's reasonably an initiative. If you're trying to sell a product, you have to say, is in general good for the mankind and for human creativity. On the other end, it really depends on where you stand and your positionality in the story, right? So here, of course, artists calling for that stop devaluing AI and destroying devaluing music with AI and destroy art. So he just some quick screenshots. It's essentially a death of art versus making everyone an artist. Extreme story. So right, just some of the headlines on the left. AI is democratizing creativity, making everyone a musician, everyone an artist. Right, it's the best time to be a creative. Yes, can augment human creativity on this right. And AI art is the opposite of art. AI art will always suck, kind of suck. AI does not democratize art. This is the big data seen. It signifies the death of the artist. So that was kind of the large landscape, the big picture. I think it's a good backdrop for us to have when we're having the conversation. And so the second big point I'm trying to make, which is also, I think, as a research question that interests me more. But essentially, I think my argument is everything we're talking about, all the headlines, comes down to some kind of argument about music value, right? We're trying to say if this is good or bad. Is something better or worse? And especially in my recent role to be a judge in all these music competitions, you are making judgments about value of a piece of work. So this is actually my co-lecturer from this class I taught is actually here in the seats. But So I teach a class at Hong Kong called Popular Music, and for one of the weeks, I think it was the concluding week, I gave a lecture on this question of good music and bad music, right? How do we talk about value when it comes to popular music? But I think this is it's a central question that the society as a whole is dealing with when it comes to creative AI, right? Like, is this good and bad? And when I talk about it being good, what am I talking about, right? So yeah, this is a fun book on bad music. So yeah, here just quoting a sociomusicologist from Britain. And I think this was actually one of the quotes which gave me one enlightening moment, I think almost like an epiphany moment recently. So he's writing about value judgments when it comes to popular music. And one of his points is that value judgments are actually really important. So a lot of us may be saying that these are pointless debates to have. You can think this is good, I can think this is bad. Empty discussion, let's not talk about value, it's pointless. But his argument is actually no, like talking about value is critical when it comes to music, especially popular music appreciation. And his general point is that value judgment only makes sense as part of an argument. And arguments are always social events. And the argument as to what good and bad music means is not about the labels, but about what should be so labeled, right? So like I think this is kind of, to me, a good background to have when we are trying to have more productive conversations about the value of, AI art, for instance, right? What are you actually talking about this work when you say this is bad, right? You have to, what is the element about this piece of work that you are labeling as bad, right? So we have to almost go the next step to be able to have a more productive exchange. And so this is basically what I show my students in that class about, some of the common discourses or arguments, as Simon Fritz may call it, when we try to make these kind of value judgments, right? So I think actually we are all familiar with these. For instance, the first one is something authentic, meaning can I sense a sense of commitment, sincerity, right, in a piece of artwork. So this is a big argument for the people who are saying AI art is not art because it doesn't involve a human artist, right? So there's just no artistic motivation, a creative intent. So like that sense of an authentic human wanting to make art, right? The second one, the skill, technicality, if someone's a good singer, right? It's kind of a familiar skill question. And the third one, the Frankfurt School critique, is more about the ways of production and distribution, right? So this is more like a capitalism critique. It's like if something is mass-produced, right, it's a cultural commodity. It's not good art. So it's kind of another line of, a big school of critique about the cultural industry. And then the fourth one is also a giant one about creativity, right? We can get into that in the conversation. Yeah, what is creative? And there's a massive scholarship around creativity. There's a huge divide between the more romanticist views of creativity, right, kind of working with your soul, right, that creative artistic genius soul, and then there's this other more rationalist side to creativity, like if essentially you make something that did not exist before and it somehow transforms like the scene or the society, then this is creativity. So it's much more straightforward. The impact, if this is right, kind of more on the receiving end, right? I don't care if there's an artist, an author, a human who creates this art, as long as the music moves me, right? It's good art. So that's kind of the impact critique. Communication is related. So to me, kind of my main purpose is to lay this out, and I think could be a good backdrop for our conversation. So for the remaining minutes, So the two themes I'm listing out here, essentially they respond to different parts of these 6 discourses around music value. And these are where my interest lies nowadays when it comes to research. And so the first one is on skill, the question of descaling. When AI descales musicians, now I no longer need to play the guitar, right? So what are we talking about when talking about artistic skill? And the idea of effort, right? If I make an instant generation by clicking one button on these commercial platforms, right? Like, how do we talk about that when it comes to value? And I think that's essentially in everyone's mind when we're trying to make our own judgments about this. And so in the current music AI scene, so this is for the AI Song Contest, we require teams to submit not just the song, they have to actually write 4-page process documents, a very process-driven competition. And this is from the early years before all the commercial one-click instant generation platforms became available. So you could see that when it comes to skill, this was actually very technically and both musically and technologically, challenging. So it's just a flow chart of how the song was generated, the feedback loop between humans and and the AI algorithms and models. So most of the teams at the time was sort of scientists working with musicians and people from the research community. But in recent years, since ChatGPT and then more of these commercial platforms became available, so we see that people who submit to this competition becomes, right, essentially you have the general public much more involved in this competition. So this is, again, like some teams would essentially write their process doc into a research paper. And this is about, right, again, their flow chart. And from here, you can see this is just a team member a listing of all the team members in one of these songs that they submit, and you can see that we are having a radical transformation when it comes to the kind of network of creative production in songwriting even, because now many of these people are first-time songwriters. They've never even imagined that they could be writing a song. But with AI, right, a machine learning scientist could now say, right, I'm the songwriter in this song. So this is what I guess, for one part, I was interested in looking into kind of the social network of who are doing who is doing what in songwriting. So this is one extreme where things actually are technically challenging, and I arguably are doing more work than someone with a guitar in his room, in their rooms, right, writing a song, of course, which could also take 8 years. But this, on the other end, we have nowadays a lot of one-click, instant generators, right? And of course, there's some of this idea of ease and minimal effort, which gets to my next point. So yeah, in general, in my own research and writing now, I was looking into, and this is an article that looks into the, in art history specifically, this transformation between, from the shift from the artisanal workshop to the artist studio, right? You have essentially a lot of the skills gradually shedded from the original artisan's role and now professionalized, right? You no longer have to make your own paint. And very similarly with music, right? Piano tuner. Originally, the pianists had to be their own tuners, right? And they had to tune their own piano. And it was only in the 19th centuries when amateur piano playing became popular and piano ownership, home ownership became popular, that you have this new profession created. So, of course, a lot of people are now thinking about what jobs are being displaced. But I think, to me, I'm less interested in that question, but it's more kind of in, this process of de-skilling and then re-skilling the artist, right? What are we talking about when talking about a skill as an artist? So one question I want to pose to everyone, which is the one I'm quite interested in, because we hear a lot of this narrative often about, oh, with AI, let's just give the boring, the less creative work, right? Like the chores. Let's have AI write an email. And we humans do the intrinsically important and creative tasks, right? Yeah, I'll have AI clean my floors and I'll do, again, the important part that's about the essence of being a human. So now I think things get really messy when it comes to the creative fields, right? Because we're hearing arguments like, well, learning music theory is so dry. So let me have the AI come up with the chord patterns and all this music theory, stuff. And I'll just do the creative work of arranging the chords and like deciding which sequence is a better chord sequence. And now you have people saying, well, playing the guitar is too dry, right? It's not creative. And I was like, too many years of practice. So let's have AI do all these sounds and, I'll do whatever is the creative work. So I think my question is for how much longer and for how far can we continue to retreat like this, and until this whole, I guess, argument collapses, right? Like, what is the remaining worthwhile skill when you keep kind of giving away? Something I'm curious in. I'll skip this. And this is a piece by, you've heard this act, Databots. They're very popular in the music AI community, death metal AI band, from two musicians who were gradually, initially trained at the Berklee College of Music, so like very skilled musicians, and they every year they submit to the AI Song Contest with very interesting message. So I don't want to see, not the sound that I want you to focus so much on, but the message on the video. It's called Can't Play Instruments. There's, I think, one more here. Yeah, so we call it anti-submissions every year. We do. Sorry. Oops. Yeah, so after skill, of course, very related is the question of effort, but of course, de-skill doesn't necessarily mean effortless, right? I think there's a difference. And for instance, we can talk about all these early avant-garde movements, the flexes of arts movement, where we've already had generations of artists who try to. I think many of you in the sea would be familiar, right, with all these earlier social movements trying to challenge the existing idea of kind of the genius artist, the virtuosic artist, the distance between art and the everyday. And again, challenge the idea of musicianship in the John Cage sense. But then I think it would be a danger to then draw that kind of equation between that, because I've seen people starting doing this. So, it's the same thing as an instant AI generation, right? It's kind of de-skilled work. So I just want to put this out there. For instance, two, one by AI, one by human. How do we think about all of this? And this is actually to illustrate a point of minimal effort. This is in another competition at UC Berkeley. You see, nowadays my side gig is judging in various music AI competitions. So this other one, for one of the entries, it's called Simple Love. And essentially the story of this piece, it sounds really bad, so I'm not going to play. But that's kind of the point, that it has to sound bad. And so essentially the ChatGPT's transcript here is the team, the songwriters conversing with the AI and trying to get AI, ChatGPT, to help him create a song with minimal effort. And an AI is here saying that, well, no, firstly, I don't have any ethical stance, but, it's ethically wrong to make art with minimal effort, so I'm not going to do this for you. And then he's kind of getting this, who are you to decide that minimal effort means bad art, and kind of gets this long debate, and then eventually ChatGPT gave up and then kind of gave him a chord sequence. And so here, in their submission, basically the statements that, well, in this case, the lyrics by ChatGPT are so stupid, but, neither we actually feel good that we put in minimal effort. I mean, this is exactly why, as long as any effort from humans would be so much better than this, right? So it's kind of, again, another case of anti-submission. So yeah, I guess this is another question I pose, is ease and effortlessness sort of contradictory to the very definition of art, easy art, lazy art, does that, and I guess goes back to that value question. This is my final point. This, I guess, the part which gets darker, maybe, I can go dark for 2 minutes. And so here, imagine a scenario which is a real scenario I have lived through. So you have all these AI, some kind of AI music festival, AI music concert, and I've been to a lot of these, trying to put together a music AI event, and then there will be someone saying, well, no, we can't just have AI on the stage. The human has to be there. We need to put a human artist on stage. That's the politically right thing to do nowadays, right? It's ethically problematic to just have AI displacing the human. So, it doesn't matter what a human artist is doing. We just have to put a human on stage. So this is literally the conversation I've been being through for a few times. And of course, in the industry, in the tech space, you see all this human-centric, open, blatant human-centrism in everything. And so for me, so for instance, this Ava is an instant music generator. In the beginning, they call themselves a virtual artist. The AI is the artist. And then, of course, they got criticism. They'd be like, no, we're just your, assistant to the human. And same here, a lot of the platforms see very subtle narrative shift to try to put human back to the picture. And having lived through a lot of these dialogue, and I think to me, what I was thinking about is, it's at some of the moments it feels less like the human instrumentalizing AI, but the AI instrumentalizing human. So I think this is a bigger question a lot of the philosophers of technology are trying to think about, right? It's like, are we using AI or is AI using us? The darker side, from this Italian philosopher who coins this term called semio-capitalism, by which he means a post-Fordist mode of production that's not about disciplining the body, but actually takes the mind, language, and creativity as the primary tools for exploitation and for production of value. And it's in this kind of information society that we gradually lose our aesthetic and emotional sensibility to the endless stress of acceleration and competition. So, and I think on a lot of the creativity debates nowadays, people are focusing on the input and output question, because that's the two ends of AI that you can see. You don't know what's happening in between, right? The black box. But I think we're missing a huge part of the creative debate, which is about the process of creativity, rather than just say, well, copyright, legal question. As long as the output is new, it's fine, right? I think that's a very superficial way to talk about creativity, personally. And so I'm not going to go into these, but there are very philosophers or great writers I admire who's been getting deep in these issues. The difference between human imagination and artificial imagination, the difference between aesthetic infinite and mathematical infinite, which is related to these two forms of information. Finally, we live in an age of overabundance. This is from one of the generators for Boomi. And initially they had this real-time count about how many songs the service was generating. And then this was last year. They were claiming that they already generated 15% of the world's, close to 15% of the world's recorded music. And of course, this freaked people out, so then they removed the count, the percentage. I think maybe now they removed the entire count altogether. So, I think a lot of us are celebrating the fact that information is readily available. We can have the world's music at our fingertip, which is wonderful, great for the creative musicians. But here, I guess, on a go darker, as an ending note, is there are great writers who kind of try to shed light on the other side, right? Is the weight of the past, the overabundance of information, of the internet, especially of information of the past, could actually be potentially destructive to creativity and to cultural progress. So this is from Mark Fisher, one of the author for the book called Hauntology, the Ghost of My Life. Hauntology meaning past haunting the present, and in a kind of negative way. So here's writing, kind of has a famous quote on no one is bored, but everything is boring. It's essentially talking about how we as a human subjects no longer able of feeling boredom, which is actually an essential state of high absorption when we start to feel this, being oppressed, and then you want to negate the present, you want to subvert, you want to transgress, you want to transform your being, and that's the creative moment. That's when you want to create. And because we're not able to feel bored in this constant overstimulated world, so we are much less likely to really want to create. I guess that's the dark note I'm going to end on. Maybe just on to not go so dark in the end, I'll play you one of my other as we welcome Alan for the conversation. This is one of my personal favorites in the AI Song Contest. It's actually a father making a lullaby machine for his daughter. So it's very minimalist, but essentially he had to train this algorithm for, hundreds of times until it learns how to put his daughter to sleep. So it's a personalized. It's so cute. And so essentially, right, this kind of learns the gesture, the movement, the crying. And so it's a personalized lullaby model for his daughter. So I'll play this as I end. It's my rank #1 that year, I think. With that, thank you so much. Okay. That's how it goes. Till infinity, yeah. Okay, do you want to move here? That's not okay.
I think we're...
Yes,
we're over here. Thank you, Stacy, for a stimulating lecture. And it's good that we end on a positive note. Let's see if we manage to do that in this conversation. Thank you. I mean, that was really enlightening to see, some of these perspectives. And it looks like it's still early. I mean, I think the industry is still deciding, what is the impact. But let's address the elephant in the room, right? Which is clearly AI in music is very disruptive. So who's going to lose their job?
I know one of my friends has lost his job to AI, who operates in precisely the functional music space. And when by functional music, we're talking about, right, sleep music, as I mentioned, ambience. And he literally, and this is before AI, he used to tell me, he doesn't need to kill one brain cell when making this kind of music for living, because, it's very formulaic. For instance, right, he makes jingles and, a 20-minute add soundtrack for BMW, right? For this kind of work. So that's the I think for sure this group is I was actually collaborating with him for some of these projects, and I soon found it so boring because essentially what you're hearing from the clients is, create this track for a product that sounds like everything else, but then won't get us sued, right? So thinking about creativity and thinking about AI replacement, I think it makes a lot of sense that this is where some of our human creators are being replaced first.
So functional music, right?
I think at least, and of course, the whole name of functional music is very interesting as a label, right? It's like pointing to music not as an end in itself, but as a means to another purpose. And I think this label becomes more visible nowadays with AI. A lot more people, of course, with the streaming platforms now revolutionizing their model, their payment model is also a response to all these, right? People cutting their noise music, there's the piano track into like 200 mini tracks and to maximize the streaming royalty payout. So yeah.
And it looks like there's a similar separation in art as well, right? I mean, if you're doing art logo design, graphic design, that is being cannibalized, right?
I think
and,
we can see
if you're
that's
doing fine art, and I think you're fine, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, previously, you mentioned quite a lot about authorship. I remember in our earlier conversation, you also mentioned that I think scholars are still figuring out, are you using AI as a tool, or are they co-creators, or does it matter, right?
Well, I think legally it's for sure now a huge topic under discussion. I mean, being debated in the Congress, Library of Congress, and the Copyright Office in the States, because currently, in at least U.S. copyright law, right, things are very dualistic. It's either persons versus things, essentially. So of course, a whole new wave of debate about whether a non-human agent can own copyright. And I don't know if you know the monkey story, right? A monkey pick up a camera of a photographer, and so that's being brought back to the picture and saying, hey, now what about AI? But so yes, even in the case of AI song contests, there are teams which list AI clearly as tools, and there are also teams who make a very bold, confident statement about AI being one of their team members. So there are actually teams which list AI as their models, as their member, one of their members. So does that matter? I guess legally for sure there is implications, but I also think in terms of how we perceive our non-human, these kind of inorganic, right, like these kind of beings that we're now dealing with, right? Life or lifeless, however we define life, and which is why in one of my earlier papers I actually look into sort of philosophy and non-Western philosophy having a very different take on how do I see robotic agents, for instance, and we find that in Japan, where you have Shinto beliefs and a lot of the early, even ancient Chinese beliefs, there is no clear division between a human life and a tree, right? So.
But isn't it unfair? You mentioned, in terms of how you evaluate what is good music, there are many criteria. You have a checklist of 5 or 6 things. One of it is, how does it impact a human, right? Do you feel? Can you feel it, right? Is it authentic, right? So why should it matter? I mean, most people actually cannot tell whether it's AI music or not. I just saw there was a research done by a professor saying that he actually had AI remix Bach, and he played 3 versions of it and asked the audience, which is a not music expert audience, to choose, and people chose the AI remix one, right? Which really frustrated him as a professor. It's like, most beautiful music, Bach, right? How come people have chosen the AI one, right? So chances are most people don't actually know what is, what is the role of AI? Is it just a tool or co-creator? So, why does it matter? Why does authorship in that sense matter?
So I guess this is the question where the answer really varies depending on who you're talking to. Right, talking to classical lovers, there's a huge part about all of this is to deliver the authors, the composers, the genius artists, the intent, right? And of course, you have writers like Roland Barthes who write about the death of the author when the author doesn't exist, it's dead the moment the art is created, right? It's really up to the audience in interpreting. So which is why I want to lay that out, because I think then it's much clearer what we are talking about when we're debating all of this, because otherwise you're just flying all these people just talking by each other nowadays when they're saying AI is good and AI is bad, right? I think that's an empty discussion if we don't actually kind of go to the next level. But yes, to me, I think personally, author matters a lot. I don't think I will become a fan of a AI model. yeah, I'm thinking about the artists I like, the independent, punk rock artists I like. If I'm having the exact same kind of body of work, but without a human, do I have the same kind of attachment? To me, I think in that genre space is very difficult because so much of it, the authenticity of the work is attached to the human who made it. Yeah.
But at least on that issue, looks like the Copyright Office have decided, right? At least they wouldn't attribute copyright ownership to AI generated.
At the moment,
pure AI
but I
generated.
think there are some, and probably internationally, I think there already are some concerning. There's some exceptions, not entirely to the federal law, but I think there have been a few interesting rulings made on that.
I think at least on the art side, I've seen that there's about half a year ago, someone used Midjourney to create a whole comic series, and she was trying to get copyright, and that failed as well, right? So similar, looks like going in a similar direction.
Right.
So in addition to the Copyright Office, someone else who seemed to have decided in the industry is Spotify. So I think you briefly mentioned it. So Spotify decided that they're going to pay professional musician a lot more than machines, or potentially
and
machines,
also amateur
right?
musician, which is so
Right.
interesting, right? Because
Right.
they're calling this artist-centric model,
Right.
but it's really big artist-centric model.
So is it fair? I mean, already probably many of you have heard of Taylor Swift, and everyone complaining that actually, even as a very popular musician, if you stream on Spotify, you get hundreds and thousands of dollars, right?
So I actually recently
So the
read.
fact that they've made this value
Right.
judgment so early, saying that professional musician get more, machine get less, irrespective of whether it is good. Is it fair, you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's again, it's about who was in the room when that decision was made, right? And whose interests do those decision makers represent? And I think I did read through the recent Spotify article explaining the rationale behind this. So there was many layers, and so they're trying to, I think, give like 4 or 5 big bullet points. For instance, the argument. So right now, essentially, you have to reach 1,000 stream to start to have copyright payout. So below 1,000, there's no money. But for now, currently, I think below 1,000, you still have some 0.0 cents. And so their argument is that money is never going to actually go to the hands of the artists who stream under 1,000 anyway, because the fee, the transfer fee, deposit fee is actually higher than those cents. So anyway, that money is just kind of this, this bad money that's going nowhere. So one of their arguments, it actually makes more sense. And of course, they are making a huge value judgment that, human-made work value is worth more than artificial art. And also ambient work somehow is worth less than a pop song. So that's a huge kind of I guess a statement when it comes to genre, because there's a lot of avant-garde new music artists making this kind of ambient and new music, which would sound totally noisy, and these are people with PhD in composition, right? And then their work would be basically zero value. So it's interesting.
I'm thinking that I'm actually fine with, if it's the consumer that is saying I want to pay for this versus not, then I'm fine. But I just had a problem with Spotify being the platform that already has such a big monopolistic power over the industry, making that judgment, right? So that actually reminded me of, it happened in the gaming industry in China already. Because around a year ago, NetEase, which is one of the biggest game developer, they were making those digital virtual weapons with AI. And when people find out, they were furious. It's that, when I pay that 10 RMB, I was expecting there's human labor that went into it. And, it caused a whole riot, and they have to apologize and take it offline. So I think it makes more sense if, it was the consumer voting, saying that they don't like it, but, Spotify making that judgment so early on, I find that quite odd.
Interesting you mentioned that too, because for this year, I'm in the past 2 years, I'm not involved in organizing the AI Song Contest. I'm just in the board. But for instance, now there is this company called Fairly Trained, which is actually started by one of our former contest organizer, who then founded JukeTech, I think, who then was sold to Spotify. TikTok. Yeah. So the argument is, so there's this Fairly Trained nonprofit which is now certifying ethical AI companies. And the AI Song Contest this year, they're basically listing a list of ethical AI tools and models. And so, yes, I think the question is, who gets to be the arbiter of, to decide which company is more ethical or not. And so, I guess a lot of the gray areas when it comes to who gets to make the decision, essentially.
Yeah, exactly, right. Let's talk about effort. So you mentioned that effort is important. is effort measured in and skill, right? But is there a judgment? Because when I was listening to it, is there a judgment also on what skills are more valuable? Is it more valuable to be able to play the violin versus the skill to do coding? You know, there's prompt engineering, as many of you may have heard, in AI as well, which is, there is skill in putting in the right prompt, right? So
people are saying prompting is now right.
Is there also, a snobbishness towards, technology, right? Technology is low, and art is.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the opposite, because I thought it would be technology being, interesting. But that's. Yeah, I guess that's the exact kind of questions that bring me to these new research topics on very seemingly abstract concepts of skill and effort. Because that's what I'm asking myself when I keep hearing people saying, well, let's give the useless task to AI and human do the essential creative. And then you're like, yeah, let's have AI come up with this and that and give chords and play guitar and arrange music and edit and do everything else. Then, right, kind of where does that stop, right? Then just the whole narrative collapse. So... yeah, but the Grammy statement then I think is really telling, right? It's kind of there needs to be meaningful human work.
But how do you measure what is meaningful human work?
Exactly,
I'm more familiar with the art side. So a calligrapher would write something in one go, and they might take 30 minutes. So is that very little effort versus someone who spent 3 months doing an oil painting? How do you judge what is effort, right?
Yeah, see, that's another area where I definitely don't have answer right now, but it's precisely, the questions I'm asking. So it will be really interesting to hear from some of you coming from different, backgrounds and different take on this. Because I think just, as an industry as a whole, that's why there's so much human-centric, everything in this space right now, which is interesting in itself because in academia, in humanities, especially like anthropology, musicology, it's been a long time since we moved beyond the human-centric models. We've been like post-humanism, transhumanism, the post-Anthropocene. We're talking about the world when humans don't matter this much because humans shouldn't matter that much. But all of a sudden, because this fear for replacement, there's
we feel threatened. Suddenly,
there's suddenly that's like human is the center of our universe once again. So I see that disconnect between at least the more scholarly community I'm part of and then kind of the public space where like the human, that's focused on the human once again.
So it sounds like it's a little bit of our fight back and negotiation with the whole situation. So is there, so we've talked a lot about maybe the dystopian side of AI music. Is there anything positive? I think you started the lecture mentioning that there is a school of thought saying that it's democratizing music making, right?
Everyone
and
is
it's
an artist.
it to be much more accessible. Is there anything positive about this development?
I mean, for instance, very simple. I've played a lot of music examples. If you like any of them, it's positive for you, right? So the question could be so simple. And it also, for sure, I don't want people to always feel like they have to pick a side with this. They have to be either dystopian or utopian, kind of thinker when it comes to this. Because there's for sure, with no question, so in a way, I was focusing maybe towards the end more on the dystopian part of the story because there is so much of the other side that I think everyone is hearing. I don't know about those in the room, but at least I guess me, because I'm working with a lot in the more high-tech side, and there is an initiative. So even for the song contest, for the AI song contest, I've been trying to propose that. Let's not say we're promoting AI. Let's say we're exploring AI, right? So it's because I think I want to leave the decision to the people and to decide like if this is to be encouraged, if this is to be promoted.
Very interesting. So you're saying let's have the debate, but there's no need to be making too early a judgment call on.
Because you can still have a debate when you make more nuanced positions than like this is all good or this is all bad, right? And
unfortunately, the headline though, it's all like, AI is going to replace jobs.
The
which
headline
really doesn't help the.
Yeah, it's for the buzz. It's very buzzy, and then especially for the argument, everyone is an artist. It's actually quoting this artist Joseph Beuys, and some of you know who made this very famous dictum: "Everyone is an artist." And then now that's kind of being sold as a advertising slogan in the industry, which I find slightly uncomfortable because what he was talking about in the 70s was a very different picture. Right, he's talking about kind of artist subverting the social system, essentially, like artists being the community that, almost like early Marx. It's like we are the artists is the community that has the potential to to again transgress. But now, I guess my question is like with all of this and AI being subsumed, art being subsumed at least partially under this larger technological system, like does this lose at least a little bit of its subverting power to kind of take us to the other side?
I'll end this with a final question and then open up the floor. Any advice you would have for people that is in the music industry right now, or people that is about to start their music career? Maybe
don't do functional music. Because I've tried, using. I mean, it's it is quite. It's just knowing at least having worked in 2 or 3 projects in the functional music space and knowing the client's requirement being having it sound like everything else, right? But copyright safe. That's fairly easy for AI to do nowadays. I mean, it's a practical, I think, advice. Seeing many of my functional music composer friends kind of having to, but yeah, I think I had this interesting conversation with the indie metal artist in Taiwan friend who was saying with this big data algorithm push, when people write and compose music now, a lot of the mindset is like, how do I make sound, snippets of my song, which is, can kind of make it easily tagged, right? So he was talking about how this actually, of course, causing even larger homogenizing effect on the scene when, right, everyone is trying to be searched and trying to be tagged. There's all this genre tag and this larger project to just essentially machine learning as a whole project of tagging and categorizing, right? And we all know there are problems with genre, with trying to divide everything into these neat categories. And I feel like, at least hearing from this friend in Taiwan, I can see that's even affecting the indie artists who shouldn't have had these kind of very, I guess, result driven, like I want to get more streams, that if we can say like a pop artist want to consider that's fine, but even from a more underground as like, let's do this so that it can be tagged under this. So yeah, I would say, to me, it's always the best to create without these kind of external, to me, distracting motivators. So which is why I started the talk by saying I'm probably one of the most indifferent people about this. You could me, even though I researched this, because I mean, personally, I don't think to this day I've used any of the AI tools for my own personal creative reason. It's just not. It's, I guess, for the kind of music I want to make myself, it just doesn't. It doesn't add anything to me. Even ChatGPT, I had to acknowledge that just the first time I typed a prompt into ChatGPT was yesterday. And I don't know if that disqualifies me to give this talk, but I actually tried, but it's banned in Hong Kong. And I feel like, and then Hong Kong, you actually makes it accessible, but I feel like my interest level was too low to go, the next step. But yesterday I actually tried. I thought I should do it before this talk to qualify myself as an AI. But sort of, again, all of my interests actually lie in all these questions this topic lead me to, but not in the technology. But again, we have enough technologists in this world right now working on the technology itself, so I think it's okay that I'm.
And in some way, I think the type of question that you pose are much deeper than just technology, right? So
or useless, right? Depending on what you were talking about, right? And that's why, again, I'm blessed to be in the kind of academia where that's the space you are allowed to think about questions not immediately useful or applicable. But I think the world is actually a much better one when not everything we're talking about is about immediate use. Because of course the most urgent and kind of immediate questions people are debating about, the most practical ones are legal ones, right? So I kind of allude to that a little bit, but that's kind of a must. So lawyers or
non-urgent topics doesn't mean that they're not important. I think
that's
the kind
what
of things you're
I
exploring
believe
are
in,
super important. With that, I would open up to the floor to see if there is any questions. Are we going to turn on the lights, or I did see a hand, so please in the middle. Are we going to pass on mic or
maybe?
Thank you so much.
Firstly, thank you all for coming. It's just lovely to have a super lovely room in this beautiful space.
Well, thank you for your talk. I'm an architect, a designer, and I wanted to learn more about AI, and it's fascinating. But what I don't understand, and I'm absolute Luddite, how does Spotify know if the music was created by AI?
It's actually interesting because there have been cases. So a lot of this then comes to the ethical question of kind of doing the good faith work of actually putting. And so even with AI song contest, right, we have this whole process document where people have to say which part is by them, and of course they're now detecting mechanism as well, but it's really difficult, right? Which is why I was talking about when I said in sampling, people are comparing the copyright crisis now in AI with sampling, but the tracing is, it's so, I was talking to a lawyer friend and they're talking about like, this is just a giant nightmare for lawyers because it's just very difficult to trace. Even sampling, you can still do so much that it sounds nothing like the original sample, but I think there is, audio fingerprint, there are technologies that's being developed, but yeah, I'm not super familiar with, it's exactly how advanced things are. But for instance, when I saw the Spotify report, they did include, and even the Deezer, when they're saying, now with this new system, we're upgrading our detecting mechanism. So I think there are people working on the technology. But at the same time, I think a while ago when we were trying to do a few, I think the AI generated tracks on Boomi were randomly attributed to like random human beings too. So there was a mess actually on Boomi, that platform, when we were we kind of having some mischievous disruption to the platform, a few of us, and it was kind of basically seeing that when we generated with AI, they kind of attribute the track that we created to a random name that we didn't even know. So yeah, I'm sure things are messy. So
Yeah, for architecture, from what I've seen, you can recognize AI images. They're still quite primitive.
so you can or cannot?
I can, the ones I've seen. There's probably much more sophisticated AI work going on than I'm familiar with. But the bits I've seen, you go, oh yeah, that looks familiar.
It's probably going to get even more difficult.
Yeah.
In the future, right?
For sure. And even, not just in music and arts, right? Like, classroom is a mess, right? Because I teach in university, and this is just a nightmare for everyone, right? How do you... So I think the latest strategy, I hate to be part of this, because why should we be having more work just because, And so I think one of the, for instance, strategies people are having students do is, save multiple version histories, like use Dropbox, so that when in doubt, you can almost kind of have this second by second and, minute by minute retrieval. So yeah, I guess that's also another kind of dystopian side where, life is getting trickier, and where I'm starting to do more in-class essay writing nowadays. I guess I fall on the more conservative side when it comes to this. That I don't want to spend 1 hour grading an essay by ChatGPT. Like that's my personal stance.
Interesting. Please.
I, in fact, have two questions. One is I'm continually being baffled by this debate about human versus AI. As far as my understanding, AI is created by humans anyway. So it's just a matter of directness, whether the human being is directly involved with the product, or is it related to the product in a longer process. My second question is, why are we all of a sudden so concerned about authenticity in art, in the sense that traditionally Chinese art, Western art, very often you have a renowned artist working with a team of apprentices. They all contribute. So let's say if the AI is like a very sophisticated team of apprentices working with an author who spotted an opportunity to use a particular AI system to help create a product. At the end of the day, should you not be evaluating a piece of art for how well it illuminates a human perspective, how much spiritual uplifting it provides, etc., etc., so that if we are evaluating an art piece with a traditional evaluation, then maybe we don't have so much trouble.
Yeah, it's also really great that you bring up traditional music too, because there's the whole other debate of training based on traditional music. I played Irish traditional material, which is kind of a question pointing to the public domain, because it's the copyright free. But to your question, I think. Precisely. That's why, at least in my experience with the AI song contest, there is actually no such rule or policy that, because this is AI, we don't evaluate it. And actually, the whole competition was about I think in the evaluation process, AI was almost treated as a equal to the human creator, and that's why you see all this feedback loop, right? With like, yeah, human feeding into AI, AI feeding back out, and then how do you do this collaboration? So that's the AI Song Contest. But then you see Grammys with their recent updates, like now are we getting closer to an AI model being nominated as a best artist? And then if that's the case, like, do we give the awards to the architect, to the developer? And so I guess there are practical concerns, and then also when it comes to the human versus AI kind of big anxiety that a lot of us are having. I remember a colleague, a composer, professor, who was raising this point that I think is quite profound, that yeah, we can expect an AI like the Beethoven model to create a lot of great sounding pieces, but it will be very unlikely for an AI to bring about a whole discourse change, like a whole movement of art, like a whole moment in our history, like a human artist can bring about, right? So this is, I guess now we are moving beyond the idea of a canon and a corpus, like a body of work, but like what a human can actually bring, to the course of our history or music history, right? Is a shift in narrative, and kind of it's much bigger, I think, and that to me was a pretty interesting point. And yeah, again, right, I did make the quick point that, computer music, machine music is nothing new, but I think what is making AI so big right now is indeed with the latest technology, with machine learning, with neural network training, we are looking at a very different kind of machine working and collaborating with humans, and which is why I was in a point at the end to the philosopher Yu Hui, who's actually a Hong Kong philosopher, and who had a computer science degree and then into philosophy. But I found his discussion super interesting when in terms of how to differentiate machine imagination versus human imagination, and I think that's usually the part where we don't get to when people just say, well, neural networks exactly like work like human brain. And I think it was that analogy that's freaking out a lot of people, right? It's kind of a machine having a human brain. And then, right, of course, that dystopian science fiction future where human is further controlled and instrumentalized by these.
I was just going to say that obviously at the moment, the idea of AI not creating its own canon is probably true, but when it reaches singularity, do you think that will happen?
On the singularity moment, I guess I would, even if it then gets closer, I was still thinking kind and type is a very different type of paradigm shift. I think the word that the composer colleague was talking about was paradigm. So I think we could have a whole paradigm shift brought about by an AI agent, but I would hesitate to put that in the same category with I guess to me, a lot of what I'm thinking about is the human condition, right? Like, it's not about human centrism, because I'm the last person to think like humans matter that much. I actually don't think we matter that much. So I guess that's like years of being in the field where we're talking about post-humanism. Of course, the bigger earth and nature. So yeah, but I still think we differentiate from each other in many different ways, right? Like between me and a tree. So yeah, I would not worry. So that's why I never feel threatened or like that this is gonna, of course, they're taking away some people's jobs, but that's the question I'm least interested about, because it seems to be so much on the headline, right, a replacement question. But to me, like, that's actually one of the most boring questions, because it literally happens every day with everything that's happening. So I think that's the one question that's not unique at all about AI.
I have a quick question about process and input and output. So I feel like there's an idea that if you input good quality information, it's going to output good quality product, right? And then good quality and low quality. And then are we in a process of racing to the top and racing to the bottom of what kind of information we put in? And then and when it becomes increasingly utility, and are we also going through the same process of before there's this sense of loss that certain things didn't get onto the internet, so that's lost forever. Now this is this idea of, oh, if this doesn't get onto AI, is it going to be lost forever? There's already this sense of loss or nostalgia in a way, the way I think about this. And then on the other side of that, then is as we race into that, new realm, how do we deal with the scale of excess and waste and abundance, right? And then,
Super interesting.
so that's
Yeah.
that's kind of what my mind goes, and how do you think about that?
Thank you. Yeah, no, that's so rich. Do you want to go first? Because I think you should share, because you have a lot. So I mean, just quickly, the good technology leads to sort of better model leads to better music part. It's really interesting because I just literally listened to a talk, which is questioning this. Is this why is the better model creating worse music? Because the equation definitely doesn't hold. Because the speaker I was listening to was comparing a much earlier rule-based and Markov chains, technology and creating amazing sort of AI music, and then the latest model creating like really horrible stuff. So I don't think there is like the equation will stand, and that's part of his argument. And I love that you're mentioning the whole, like if I don't get this to AI, it's lost, and it's kind of sad to me. If that's the case, I would actually prefer the music I like or the artists I like to be lost. There was to not be trained by AI. And I think I heard a similar statement by a Peking opera practitioner friend who was saying, like, if you have to alter the very essence of a being just to be known by more and then to be more accessible, then it's best that it's even better that you just don't exist. Like, he's actually rather that his practice just becomes the past, it becomes history, becomes tradition, than having it adapt to technology. So there are like very extreme traditionalist positions, right? Which I'm not saying I hold, but I can totally see that. And but one point on that, where I think I was at this German workshop on music and AI, and then it's called The Future of Music Knowledge in the Age of Machine Learning. And I think there was a discussion about, for instance, why is Bach the first music that's being trained by AI? Why isn't it classical music? Because these are very rule-based type of music, right? There's very clear rules. And now, as an ethnomusicologist or musicologist, to me, there is actually a potential danger in this AI movement leading to more music traditions thinking that we need to have theory, we need to have rules so that we are kind of on the same level, it's like there is this hype about, of course, music theory. A lot of traditions don't have theory. Like the whole point, Hindustani classical music didn't have a theory. Carnatic music didn't have a theory, but there was a whole process of classicization and then making this music into theory. But that's not a very neutral process. It's a process with lots of politics. And for instance, right now people were saying, classical music is the one that gets AI trained first. So it's a more advanced, and in a way it's more it works better, it harmonizes better with technology, so it's a more advanced tradition. I think that's a very kind of big danger spot, right, where we're saying all these oral traditions, all these traditions with improvisational, I mean, even jazz improvisations now, you heard of free jazz, all of this is true, but does it enhance and improve a tradition when, does it make a tradition better if it's, it complies with technology? That to me could be a tricky place.
I think we're up on time. Maybe last question?
I don't know if I've been...
Oh, sorry. Get him.
Do you have a question? You can go ahead if you want. It's all right.
Maybe two quick questions then.
Okay.
You start.
Okay,
Yes.
cool.
I have time.
I just had a question on your thoughts on centralized AI versus decentralized AI, because I'm pretty familiar with the benefits of decentralized systems in Web3, and assuming that there's going to be real value in AI products in the future, music in the future, is there a need for a movement towards decentralized AI? With Web3, for example, there are tokens that can be hacked and stolen, and that can be catastrophic in millions of dollars, for example. So assuming that Spotify is a monopoly in a centralized system, and this music has real value in terms of fiat, is there a need for decentralized AI, and your thoughts on that?
Actually, this is the area where, I think maybe Alan would have more thoughts on this, having more experience with the, kind of Web3 and token and even the NFT side. To me, just a quick no, I think it does come back to the question of ownership, right, and appropriation, and right. I mean, I think it would be an important. That's my simple answer, but I'll probably give this to you. You have more experience in this.
Yeah, I think that would be a technology overlay. I mean, blockchain probably will solve one of the major issues around music and AI, which is around authorship and remixing, and then who owns it, and then how you do royalty attribution, and that's possibly solved by blockchain, right? So those are, in fact, those are that's the exact business problem that a lot of the companies that I invest in try to solve. I think we're still, a few, maybe at least a good year or two away from, cracking the industry, because right now a lot of it is still around sort of the more EDM side of the music rather than, a Taylor Swift, right? Although the problem also exists for her. Like if you go remix a Taylor Swift song and put it on TikTok, she doesn't get a cut of anything, right? So is there a way to solve that problem, right? I think that there are technologies that's trying to solve it, but it's probably going to be step by step, right? Maybe the last question here.
Okay, thank you. So, thank you very much for your talk. So I personally am not working in the art and the creative industry. I work in the traditional banking and the finance industry. So in our industry, we actually do provide training to the employees on how to write the right prompt in order to get the good answer, similar to what Alan just mentioned, because writing the good prompt is also a very useful skills. Like say, for example, always assume the role of the you're trying to ask. Like say, for example, assuming you're a financial analyst, or assuming you're a doctor, or assuming you're a musician, before you ask the question to the AI model, you will get very different answers. So that's the one technique to ask the prompt. Like always assume the role of the machine before you ask the question. So yeah, it's a very interesting thing. So my question to you, Stacy, is that, so although there's debate on whether we should use AI to create music, do you see a possibility, like in music education or music schools today or later, that maybe adding how to use AI to create music somehow to become is it possible? Like maybe in functional music, yeah.
Of course, I'm giving that course next semester on AI music in Hong Kong. But because it's taught by me, it's not going to be a very machine learning focused. But actually, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I just, in the 8-hour talk, I was telling you that I watched, it was an 8-hour music and AI symposium I was killing my day yesterday with. One of the point was basically this prediction. I don't know, some speakers saw this from somewhere else, that the best musician in the future is going to be music journalists and music critics, because they write the best about music. And I was like, that's, yeah. It's basically about prompting, right? Because they have very nuanced ways of describing music and writing about music. And so they're going to be the musician of the future generation. So yeah, but we've had engineers from Google Magenta, for instance, come into our popular music class and give talks, and I can see students of music theory freak out about why are we still learning music theory? And it's interesting that I had the German workshop I was talking about, in which I was grouped with 2 other music theorists, and then because music theory is the part of music training scholarship that's most pseudo-scientific, right? Like that's most rule-based. So then, yeah, I think there's questions, for instance, about teaching music theory, like why do students still learn if now, Bach Doodle, there's a Bach Doodle that can do the Bach harmonization. But I remember the music theorists I was talking about, the professors, they were saying, actually, the music theory training, the part that as professors of music theory, what they want to train students is actually the part that's not about the rules of music theory is actually everything that came beyond that, right? So it's when you stop breaking, theory. I think when I was taking my music theory class, the first thing I was taught is this is a bad science, right? It's when you, of course, learn it and then start to break it. So yeah, I think that was an argument that, and of course, then you can also tell them, look, you can now work at Google because there's actually a lot of interesting career options too. For this is a real example, right? The person who made Bach Doodle at Google was because the team had a good music theorist. They actually had a whole music composition and theory education.
So maybe in future the best musician would come from very different backgrounds.
Yeah, and of course, universally, there are refashioning, and there are people already, universities like in the States, already changing, revolutionizing the whole music department curriculum, and you are no longer going with the, Bach, Schubert, and it's not the same sequence anymore. So yes, I think AI is definitely changing the way people think about education, about music education for sure, about arts education. It's huge. But yeah, to me, I guess at least one encouraging note I heard from, I think, an engineering professor, I think, at MIT was like, the future is in the hands of humanities scholars, because, right, this is the part that remains more human.
That is a great way to end
more
the
or less
session.
human.
The future is in the hands of the humanities scholars.
Thank you.
All right, with that, I'll close the session. Thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.